Today I want to tell you about Marwencol, which is a documentary about the life of Mark Hogenkamp made by the director Jeff Malmberg. Marwencol was funded and produced by the company Openface, which is run by Jeff Malmberg and its production partner Chris Schellen. The movie focuses on the impact that a vicious attack in 2000 outside a bar had on the life of Mark Hogenkamp. Mark was left badly bruised and battered and was in a coma before eventually regaining consciousness. Mark had virtually lost all his memories due to severe brain injuries, and he had to learn to read and write again. The movie is a beautiful delivery of Mark's internal world and how Mark comes to terms with these traumatic events and other traumatic events in his life. Marwencol is Malmberg's first attempt at directing a movie, as he used to edit documentaries. He learned about Mark Hogenkamp and went to New York with the intention of making a quick documentary in one weekend. However, Malmberg became friends with Mark and spent nearly 4 years, from 2006 to 2010, with him working on the documentary. Malmberg became engrossed in Mark's story and felt kinship with him since they were both trying to start over in life. It is also clear from the documentary that Mark is a vulnerable person, that only a close relationship between Mark and the director Jeff Malmberg will allow for the documentary to be made at all. Malmberg is sometimes really the fly on the wall when Mark is absorbed in his Marwencol world. Malmberg shot so much material that he felt the real effort of making the documentary was not the directing per se, but the editing of the voluminous material collected and making sure that Mark was able to tell about his life in a very genuine way. However, I had the impression that there was very little editing to make a specific point. Mark directly narrates his story and his life in Marwencol to the camera. It is like Mark is directly speaking to you as a person. Mark is almost in your living room, so to speak. Mark himself is the tool that Malmberg uses to represent reality. The documentary is therefore biographical in nature, but it starts to place the documentary in a specific genre such as mystical, art, medical, or psychological. I also found that there was a very imperceptible blurring between the lines of movie and documentary. The documentary is very cleverly done and is quite unique by being so captioned that one completely forgets that it's a documentary. I found myself thinking at one point, this movie is so well enacted, and who is the actor? Marwencol is not just a documentary, but the subject matter is really brought to life very vividly and in such a direct manner that it mesmerizes the viewer. I forgot that I was watching a documentary. Despite Malmberg's background as an editor, this is very much a realist documentary than a formulous one. The set, lighting, and sound is simple. The documentary is all about Mark talking to us in his home or in his Marwencol world. The film shows Mark and lets Mark tell his story with the use of so many close-ups to make the audience directly connect with Mark. The viewer really gets to know Mark and his emotions. Now, let me tell you more about the story of Mark and Marwencol. Disoriented and unable to reconnect with society after his beating, Mark retreats into a fantasy world and builds a 1/6 scale World War II era miniature town in his backyard. This is called Marwencol. Mark starts to recall that he used to be good at painting and tries to hone his fine motor skills, but his building is almost lifelike in the new world in painstaking detail. Mark starts to recall that he used to be good at painting and tries to hone his fine motor skills by building his almost lifelike new world in painstaking detail. The dolls in the town are alter egos of him and imaginary people. Initially, these are just Mark and women represented by beautiful Barbie dolls. Americans and Germans get along in a harmonious town. Mark states that there's only one rule in his town: everyone has to be friends. What a difference this turns out to be compared to the life that he used to live, as Mark discovers during his life in Marwencol. The world of Marwencol is, for Mark, one of healing, therapy, and a rediscovery of his old self. Mark runs a bar called Hogan's Camp Catfight Club. I found it interesting that Mark only drinks coffee in his bar. While in the bar, Mark starts to realize that he used to be an alcoholic and he had split up from his wife many years ago. He spent most of his time drunk, yearning for alcohol, and very unhappy. However, somehow the severe beating and brain injury has cured Mark from his lust for alcohol. In playing with his puppets in Marwencol, Mark appreciates what he had lost in his life: love. Mark is searching for love and wonders how he can love again. He projects all these feelings onto a puppet named Anna, his girlfriend in Marwencol. Gradually, the world of Marwencol becomes more hostile, with the German SS killing one of the female puppets, when the German SS tries to find and take over Mark's bar. The German SS interrogate Mark, ties him up, and beats him up to the extent that the puppet representing Mark is left scarred, much like the beating he had received at the bar in the real world. Fortunately, the women of Marwencol rescue him from the SS, but the women leave the SS ringleader alive to exact further revenge. One can only imagine what this would be. Perhaps Marwencol is not always that friendly place after all. There's still a lot of rage and anger in Mark relating to the attack on him. I found it therefore no surprise that Marwencol is set in a war scene. Mark has a number of internal conflicts and fights that he is trying to resolve. However, Mark does find new hope and love again in Marwencol and marries Anna. Gradually it becomes apparent that Mark is not merely trying to rekindle his artistic skills, but his true art consists of his creation Marwencol and the fantasy life that he is living with his new cocooned world. During the documentary, Mark narrates in detail what happens in the town and the feelings that all the events stir in him. Mark is safely reliving some of his prior experience within the protected world of Marwencol. Marwencol is safe because Mark ultimately controls what happens in his fantasy town. This control further brought to the forefront by his meticulous photographic documentation of all that happens in Marwencol. Mark is painting again, but by now in a new medium, photography. The intentionally composed photographs are a very personal narration of Mark's life and struggles in Marwencol. The photos are not just documentation, but are meant to bring emotion in Mark. It becomes increasingly clear during the documentary that Mark's art is his therapy and his way of coming to terms with his lost marriage, likely resulting from his alcoholism. He also resolves his anger issues caused by the cruel beating outside the bar that made him nearly lose both his life and almost all his memories. Marwencol is therapy for a wounded man. Eventually, the outside world starts to intrude into Marwencol. Mark has his photographs always developed at the same store, and the photographer notices them. The editor of Esopus magazine becomes interested. The editor is always looking for real, unfiltered, non-commercial original art, often from new and undiscovered artists. He is offered an art show at the prestigious New York City Gallery in the trendy Greenwich Village, where all of his photographs of Marwencol will be displayed, thus narrating Mark's story. The opportunity generates a lot of internal conflict in Mark. On the one hand, he is proud and wants to show his fantasy world. On the other hand, he is uncomfortable to have his private life and feelings on display. Remember, Marwencol is built by him, for him. He does not want to share it with anyone. On the other hand, Mark gradually populated Marwencol with friends based off real-life people. Mark states that if you have a puppet in Marwencol, then you used to be important in my life. He wants to come out, but it becomes apparent that there is more to this. Mark is still afraid to go out and get beaten again. He has to overcome these and other fears. His Marwencol wife, Anna, is angry since he still has mental problems inside of him, and she doesn't want him to go either. He has to choose between living in a fantasy world or re-entering the real world, where he was so cruelly beaten. There are also practical issues. What to wear, for instance, at the art show. Mark realizes that his cupboards are full of women's shoes and panties at home. He finds them almost by happenstance and asks a rare visiting friend if he had always used these. His friend informs them that he used to buy these and wear these. Mark dresses the puppets in Marwencol with panties and miniature female shoes, which gives him a lot of satisfaction. Mark gradually comes to realization that he used to be a cross-dresser, the very reason that he was jumped upon and beaten at the bar, also the likely cause of his failed marriage and his problems with alcohol. He wants to wear a chiffon suit to the art show, but eventually settles for a casual male attire. The art show is a success. Many visitors find his work highly original, stunning, and fascinating. The art show will also receive rare reviews. Mark attends his art show and becomes comfortable and mixes with the public. Towards the end of the art show, Mark is even seen wearing high-heeled shoes. In the closing scenes of the documentary, it becomes clear that Mark has made great strides in his recovery, gained enormous confidence, and learned a tremendous amount about himself. However, for now, Mark wants to retreat again to Marwencol. His journey of self-discovery is not over yet, and more work is to be done in the safe world of Marwencol, like in the private consulting room of a therapist. I was left with the impression that Mark was able to make a complete re-entry into society as a new and whole person, but he's not there yet. Moral healing has to be done. Overall, Marwencol is more than just an interesting story about a somewhat weird character. I can relate to Mark's story. Marwencol depicts the struggle in people's lives and shows that there's hope for all of us to overcome, even severe adversity, injustice, and anger. Furthermore, healing can come in many ways, and sometimes our individual quirkiness can be used to great advantage. Lastly, one of the morals is that self-acceptance is important. One cannot be at peace unless one comes to terms with perhaps unusual proclivities such as cross-dressing. I found Marwencol fascinating. Jeff Malmberg takes you by the hand, or rather Mark does, and Mark tells his story gradually, revealing all of his conflicts and explaining how he is finding his way to recovery. The documentary is very engaging and makes one think about one's own life and the people around you. Overall, this documentary goes well beyond the realm of a supernatural documentary and makes one reflect upon life in such a broad manner. Marwencol really exceeded my expectations. I'm not surprised this inspirational debut won many awards. Marwencol has been considered as one of the top 20 essential documentaries of the century by the New York Magazine.